Hey, church, this is Pastor Phil here. Man, I know we're just coming out of the Easter season, and man, what a blessed season that was. Even though we were kind of locked up with the whole coronavirus, I see that many of you were able to gather for the Easter service, and my wife and I and the kids were actually able to make it to last week's sermon. And man, what a great time it was to honk our horns and still be together, even if it was at a distance. I want to encourage each and every one of you really to reach out to one another during this time. And even though, we're crossing our fingers and we're hoping that the end is in sight, don't forget to reach out to one another and to love on each other. Today's sermon is called It's Not Over When It's Over. And I want to start this sermon by telling you a story. A man and his wife and his mother-in-law were going on a trip to the Holy Land, and unfortunately, his mother-in-law had passed away during that trip. And the undertaker said to him, we can either send your wife home or send your mother-in-law home for $5,000 and you can have her buried in the States, or we can bury her here for $150. What a bargain, right? Well, the husband said, no, we'll pay the $5,000, send her back home. And the undertaker said, why? Why would you do that when it would save you so much money? And it's such an honor to be buried here in the Holy Land. And he says, no, you don't understand. You guys buried some guy 2,000 years ago, and he came back from the dead 3 days later. I'm not taking any chances with my mother-in-law, so I'll pay the $5,000. I always told my dad, you can't spell funeral without F-U-N. And as much as I can joke, when we talk about death, right? It is dark, and it's not always the most pleasant thing to discuss, right? But I've seen it bring out the best in people, and I've seen it bring out the worst in people. And I think all of us can agree that as we have seen and experienced death, there's times when we do see both of these, and death itself is already sad enough without adding the stressors of our own attitudes, right? If it brings out the worst in us, it seems to just make the situation so much worse, and feelings get hurt way more easily, and it becomes a mess quickly. But I think that sometimes when we think about death, we don't think about it, right? We push it off, we push it down, and we don't sit there and dwell on it. And I think for the most part, that's very healthy, right? We don't want to sit there and be morbid and just dwell on death. I don't think Jesus did that very much. I don't think that, even though he was aware that he was going to die and he told everybody about it, and he knew his death would come, we're not. I don't think we're to sit down and just think about death all the time, right? That's no fun at all. But what I would say is that death, since the fall of man, has been one of the most, not the most, but has been a very powerful force in our reality. Before Jesus honestly, before Lazarus, right? Death never lost a fight. Everybody, except for a couple of guys that we don't have record of them dying. One went up in I believe a chariot, right? Death has held on to everybody. And even after Lazarus and Jesus, death still has held on to people, right? We have the hope and we have the knowledge that yes, when we die, we will be in heaven. However, death is a powerful foe. And no one except for Jesus has been able to stand up to it. And because of that, the power that death seems to have over us as humanity, every single culture and every single religion, they have their own version of what happens during death and what happens after. Some would say that you are going to be reincarnated. You're going to come back either better or worse, depending on what good or bad that you've done in your life. Some say that you just can't know for sure if you're going to end up in heaven or if you're going to end up in hell, or what level of heaven some think that they have. And some believe that all of our deeds will be weighed, and if our bad deeds outweigh our good deeds, then we go to hell. And if our good deeds outweigh our bad deeds, then we get to go to heaven, right? And even then, we're not quite sure. And in this, there's even some that believe that after you die, there's nothing, or that if you die, you get stuck in this middle ground in between the two, and you either have to do your time or work your way out. Or at one point, some were trying to pay tickets to let those people out. If you wanted your family member to go from this middle ground, some call it like purgatory or whatever, if they wanted to get out of there and to go on to heaven, they would they would offer tickets, or they would offer, if you pay us X amount of money, we promise you they will be gone from there and into heaven. Each different philosophy and religion and background seems to come with these different views. And what's sad, though, is that in all of those worldviews, no one really knows what's going to happen. And this is why, folks, Christianity is so in-your-face different from these other worldviews. And it seems so scandalous to them that we can say that when I die, I know that I know that I know where I'm going, and that is in heaven with Jesus. And we can say this with confidence, and we can say that yes, death is powerful, but my God is greater than even death, and he has overcome. I'm reminded of a little boy who has done something wrong, being told to wait in his room until his father would get home. The mom says, wait till your father gets home, wait in your room. And he's waiting there on pins and needles on the edge of his bed, just sweating, waiting to hear the car pull up, the door close, and the footsteps coming up the stairs. And I think about this, and this boy is wondering, am I going to get beat, or am I going to get the belt or mercy? Like, which one is it going to be? And I feel like this is the reality that most of the world lives in. It's like they're going through this life, sweating bullets whenever they think about, man, when my time is up, am I going to live or am I going to die? As Christians, we have 1 Corinthians 15:15, and it says, where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? And in short, it almost feels like this verse is a taunt, that we as Christians, we're looking at Satan, or we're looking at death, I should say, and being like, you got nothing on us. And man, I remember this one time, my little brother was acting out, and he was little, and my stepmother was telling him he better knock it off. And he looked up with a grin at her and he said, what are you gonna do? Spank me? Man, he was taunting her, man. After going through that stage and realizing that, bro, you don't want to go there. Like, you're gonna get spanked. But he was taunting her, and I think that, man, that attitude is kind of similar in this instance, because before Christ, death was the final word. Everything that death took, death kept. There was no overruling once death made its final decision. It was the threat of death that kept people enslaved. People were so afraid that if they would cower in fear of the most powerful to avoid death at all costs. But since the death and the resurrection of Christ, we now can look people in the face when death comes knocking, and we can say, what are you going to do? Kill me? Death doesn't have any hold on us anymore. In Philippians 1:21, it says, "To live is Christ, but to die is gain." And as followers of Christ, because of his death and resurrection on the cross, we join him in death and also a new life. So now when we go through this life, dying to our flesh and walking out in the new life, death no longer has its sting, and it is no longer victorious. We as Christians are the only ones who can make this claim with confidence. It is what separates us from the rest of the world. And folks, I want to just take a minute here and just, when we die, we believe that we're going to heaven, and this is true. But not only did we stop death there, or did Christ stop death there for us, but you must realize that there is also this thing we call resurrection. A resurrection is not just a spiritual thing in heaven. There will come a time that we will be resurrected here on earth. So, when we say, this world is not our home, I'm just a passing through. Well, actually, when we look at the belief of resurrection, when Jesus comes back, heaven and earth are going to be one. And we will be given new bodies. So yes, we don't, when we die, we go to heaven, but heaven is not our final resting place. Heaven's going to come and meet earth, and we will have new bodies. And actually, earth is going to be where God has intended us to be all along. And so not only do we have this hope that when I die, I'm not going to suffer, I'm going to go to the nice place, right? We have this hope that says, and when Christ returns, I will have a new body, and I'll be walking on this earth forever and ever. It is this hope that makes us so different from all the other viewpoints and all the other religions. When I lived in Ohio, I had a friend of mine who was going to a funeral. He didn't know the person that died, but many of his friends did, so he went to support his friends. I honestly cannot tell you why I asked to go, but I felt like I needed to go, and I asked him, and he said, sure, I can go with them. And so we were sitting there in the funeral, and it was kind of a normal funeral. This Christian girl had died in an unfortunate hiking accident, and she was college age, early 20s, if not a little younger than that, and she had fell off a cliff and died, and it was tragic. But the funeral was normal. You were in a kind of a church or a chapel building on the campus, and they had such a beautiful service, but it was what you typically expect. However, afterward, after the funeral was over, my friend had asked if we could stop by this house on our way home. And I was like, sure, why not? And the thing is, the house had belonged to a Christian fraternity that was on campus. And the girl had belonged to the fraternity, and they decided, instead of doing what the world usually does, they all met together in that house, and they sang worship songs until I think it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. They were singing worship songs, and the heart and the cry. Yes, there were tears, but there was this joy that was there that says, because she was with Christ, and because we are with Christ, we don't have to say goodbye. We can say we'll see her later. And see, this is the joyous promise that we have. And man, what a testimony that was. The most beautiful thing I've ever seen is that as Christians, yes, we can still say it is sad. Christ himself was sad when death happened, because death was never meant to be for us. But it is a joyous thing for us Christians because of the promise that we are no longer suffering here on this world, but we will be in heaven. And not only will we be in heaven, but there will come a time when all of creation will be restored, and we will be given a new body here on this earth, and we will be here for all eternity with those who believe in Christ and has followed him. Death still sucks, but it really is not victorious, and it has lost its sting. Friends, we are called as LCM Church to live Christ's mission. All Christians are called to do this. And here it is. He left us with this mission of his, to go into the world, to preach the gospel, making disciples and baptizing them, teaching them to obey everything he commanded. Every person that gives their life to Christ, who follows him and who choose to become disciples, has freedom over sin and death. We just celebrated Easter, which we should do daily. But the reason we celebrate Easter is because through it, we are given this freedom over death and this promise of eternal life. Many of our neighbors struggle because they push the thought of death so far down, away from their daily thoughts because of the fear and uncertainty it brings. Easter is not just something we celebrate, but man, it's a gift that we are made to give, and that we are made not just to give each other, but man, this is a gift that we were to give to anyone that we encounter. So in closing, I want to ask any of you who are listening, does the thought of your death scare you? Folks, I don't want to spook you. I really don't. But I have two main concerns here. First is I would hate to have any of you who are Christians who follow him and love him to have fears over death. I want you to be confident of what Christ has done for you. However, I am also concerned for some of you who think you are a Christian. You do churchy things. You feel like you're nicer than your neighbor, but if it really got down to it, you didn't surrender to Christ. And if you cannot say that you have an ongoing relationship with him, man, I would hate for you to think that you're okay. You see, there's two ways that I see some people fall into fallacy, right? They are walking with the Lord and they are trusting him, but they don't fully grasp and fully believe or fully trust that they have that hope. And so it's very scary. And God says, trust in my word. If you were to die today, you would be with me in heaven. But, man, even worse than that is thinking that you're okay just because you've been doing churchy things. But man, if you cannot tell me that you have a relationship, and when I say relationship, I don't just mean you're doing the churchy things. I mean you are you know God and God knows you. Not that you just know about him, but you know him. I would be doing a terrible job as a pastor to not also caution you, because I would hate for you to go through your whole life and thinking you're okay. And then when it comes down to it, your time of death, I would hate for him to say, I don't know you. Folks, I love you. And this is why I'm approaching this subject today. If you feel like that little boy sitting on his bed, sweating bullets, dreading the thought of passing over, then I suggest you do some soul searching. Reach out to a pastor or a Christian friend who is solid in their faith. If you need encouraged and reassured and convinced of where you stand with God, then seek it out. If you realize that maybe you don't have a relationship with God and you've just been playing church, then seek help and make that decision today to fully surrender to Christ and his plan for your life. Don't allow fear or blindness take away the gift that we just celebrated, which is an Easter. Jesus defeated the grave once and for all for you. It holds nothing over you. And this is why we should celebrate. God bless you guys.